A former police officer, utilizing decades of investigative experience, undertook an extraordinary mission to expose the concealed realities of the UK Labour Party. This was not a simple inquiry. It required extensive planning, strategic deception, and a level of patience and persistence that few could endure. His goal was to infiltrate the inner circles of a political machine known for its secrecy and carefully controlled public image. The Labour Party was notorious for its rigorous background checks and highly structured internal security measures, ensuring that only trusted members and vetted individuals had access to sensitive discussions. Despite these challenges, the detective meticulously crafted a false identity, presenting himself as a wealthy donor who was passionate about supporting progressive reforms. This disguise was his key to gaining entry into exclusive meetings, where high-ranking officials discussed policies and strategies behind closed doors. This investigation was not undertaken lightly. The detective knew that merely being present at these events was not enough. He needed to capture solid evidence. To achieve this, he employed sophisticated recording devices disguised as everyday objects. His watch, pen, and even a coffee mug were equipped with concealed microphones capable of recording conversations without raising suspicion. This allowed him to gather an extensive archive of audio evidence, totaling over 200 hours of discussions. These recordings provided an unfiltered glimpse into Labour's internal strategies, revealing the stark contrast between its public messaging and its true intentions. While the party publicly championed policies aimed at protecting working-class citizens, these closed-door discussions painted a vastly different picture, one where political power and financial maneuvering took precedence over the well-being of ordinary people. The officials who spoke candidly in these meetings were unaware that every word they uttered was being meticulously documented, exposing a reality that Labour had worked hard to keep hidden. One of the most shocking revelations that emerged from this investigation concerned Labour's secret tax agenda. The party had repeatedly reassured voters that it would not raise taxes on working-class citizens, a promise that had helped solidify public support. However, the reality uncovered by the detective told a different story. High-ranking Labour officials were actively strategizing ways to increase government revenue through a series of covert tax adjustments that would remain unnoticed until they were fully implemented. Among these strategies was the elimination of national insurance exemptions for working pensioners. This policy would disproportionately affect elderly citizens who relied on part-time employment to supplement their modest pensions. Instead of supporting this vulnerable demographic, Labour sought to introduce an additional financial burden that would make it even harder for them to maintain financial stability. Additionally, there were plans to significantly raise capital gains tax, aligning it with standard income tax rates. This measure would place an enormous strain on small business owners and individuals who had spent years, if not decades, building their financial security. Many of these entrepreneurs had hoped to retire on the profits from selling their businesses, but Labour's concealed plans would strip them of a significant portion of their earnings. The recordings also captured discussions about expanding inheritance tax, a move that directly contradicted public reassurances from party officials that no such policy changes were being considered. By broadening the scope of inheritance tax, Labour aimed to extract more revenue from families, effectively penalizing those who wished to pass down wealth to future generations. Perhaps the most deceptive of all these tax strategies was the introduction of a land value tax under the guise of council tax reform. This policy would place an immense financial strain on homeowners, particularly those who had spent their lives paying off mortgages in hopes of securing a stable future. The internal discussions revealed that Labour officials were well aware of the negative impact these changes would have, yet they proceeded with their plans under the assumption that the general public would not fully understand the implications until it was too late. The language used in these private conversations was strikingly different from the carefully curated messaging presented to voters. Instead of discussing ways to protect and uplift working citizens, officials were focused on how best to disguise their true intentions to minimize political backlash. Beyond the tax revelations, the detective uncovered an even more disturbing reality: Labour's deliberate concealment of widespread criminal activity for political gain. The investigation revealed that party officials had exerted pressure on law enforcement agencies to avoid disclosing the ethnic backgrounds of offenders involved in organized crime. This was not an accidental oversight, but a deliberate political strategy. Labour leadership feared that acknowledging certain patterns in criminal activity would result in the loss of electoral support from key voting blocs. In one particularly damning recording, a senior party official admitted that publicly addressing these crimes would be politically devastating, as it could cost them crucial votes in specific constituencies. Internal documents obtained by the detective confirmed that Labour's political strategists had meticulously calculated the number of votes they could potentially lose if they acknowledged the extent of these criminal activities. Rather than prioritizing public safety, the party leadership chose to suppress critical information to maintain voter loyalty. The consequences of this decision were severe. By intentionally obscuring these crimes, Labour created an environment in which offenders operated with impunity while victims remained unheard and unprotected. This was not a single incident of political maneuvering, but a sustained, deliberate effort to prioritize electoral success over fundamental justice. Equally troubling was the revelation regarding Labour's plans for the National Health Service, NHS. Publicly, the party had positioned itself as the staunchest defender of the NHS, vowing to protect it from budget cuts and privatization. However, the detectives' recordings told a vastly different story. Internal discussions among high-ranking Labour officials revealed plans for large-scale job cuts within the NHS, disguised as an effort to reduce bureaucratic inefficiencies. Ministers admitted in private meetings that their restructuring plans would result in the termination of approximately 9,000 jobs. Yet they focused on how best to frame this policy so that it would not spark public outrage. Officials debated various messaging strategies, attempting to find ways to present these layoffs as necessary improvements rather than cost-cutting measures. Additionally, the recordings captured discussions about expanding private sector involvement in the NHS. One minister was recorded acknowledging that once the reorganization was complete, it would be far easier to introduce private healthcare contracts without triggering widespread scrutiny. These revelations completely contradicted Labour's public commitments to protecting the NHS and maintaining accessible healthcare services. Instead of prioritising patient care, party officials were focused on cost-saving measures that would open the door to increased privatisation, an outcome that they knew would be unpopular among voters. The detective also uncovered troubling discussions about social welfare benefits. While Labour publicly declared its commitment to supporting society's most vulnerable members, internal conversations indicated that officials were actively planning reductions in government assistance. One of the primary targets was disability benefits. In closed meetings, officials debated strategies for cutting expenditures without openly announcing reductions. One of the methods discussed was freezing payments so that inflation would gradually erode their real value. Another proposed tactic was tightening eligibility criteria, ensuring that a significant percentage of current recipients would no longer qualify for assistance. In one particularly unsettling recording, a senior Labour figure dismissively referred to benefit recipients as a drain on resources, exposing the stark difference between the party's public rhetoric and its private views. The broader implications of these revelations raise serious concerns about Labour's commitment to transparency and accountability. The recordings revealed a pattern of deception in which public statements were carefully crafted to maintain voter confidence, while internal strategies were designed to implement unpopular policies without immediate backlash. Tax increases were framed as technical adjustments. Crime statistics were manipulated for political expediency. NHS job cuts were disguised as efficiency measures, and benefit reductions were spun as incentives for employment. The detectives' findings highlighted the extent to which Labour officials prioritized maintaining power over enacting honest and ethical governance. The importance of these revelations cannot be overstated. They demonstrate how a political party, while presenting itself as a champion of working people, was simultaneously engaged in behind-the-scenes maneuvering that directly contradicted its public promises. The detectives' work serves as a stark warning about the necessity of holding political leaders accountable. If left unchecked, these deceptive practices could reshape policies in ways that severely impact the lives of ordinary citizens, all while voters remain unaware of the true motivations behind their leaders' decisions. As the public grapples with these findings, one crucial question remains: how much of what politicians say can truly be trusted? The detectives' investigation has exposed the extent to which Labour officials were willing to manipulate public perception in order to maintain power. These findings underscore the need for increased scrutiny, transparency, and skepticism when evaluating political promises. In a world where public trust in government is already fragile, this investigation serves as a vital reminder that vigilance and accountability are the only safeguards against the unchecked ambitions of those in power. See you next time.